Welcome to Kvetchfest. I'm Jen.
And I'm Debbie.
We're Jewish.
So we like to kvetch.
I like to complain.
And I like to discuss things.
I grew up with my mom talking about all sorts of stuff. So I thought it would be fun to bring her onto Kvetchfest so we can have more conversations about life, politics, and everything in between.
I'm a boomer.
And I'm a millennial.
Our different perspectives could lead to shared insights, differing opinions, and new realizations about the world, ourselves, and our relationship. Be part of our community as we explore more together in relationship as parent and child.
Complaining can be cathartic, so let's kvetch together. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kvetchfest. I'm Jen.
And I'm Debbie.
And today we're going to talk about grief and grieving. So buckle up and bring your tissues because things might get heavy, and we'll try to guide this conversation in a loving way. There's a lot to unpack here, as there always is with grief. I don't even know where to start this. We're currently grieving the loss of a dear loved one in our family. And with that, you think about all the other loss you've experienced in your life and how that stacks up and compounds, and it brings out different emotions for a lot of different reasons, but it brings out different emotions based on who you're grieving and their relationship to you, of course, and other people in your life you may have lost, and all those feelings around that person that's no longer here. Mom, help guide this because this is tough. This is tough. Yeah.
It is tough. And as you get older, you experience more loss.
Yeah.
And then you experience losses that you weren't anticipating. Right? Which I think that might sound silly. Nobody anticipates a loss, but there are certain losses, especially when we think of ages of people and people who might be younger than ourselves or people that we never expected would be out of our lives suddenly. So I think it always feels sudden, but there are indications for some people and others not. And so I think that essentially when somebody passes away, people are generally in a state of shock, no matter what the circumstances are. And then there's a sort of flurry of figuring out what to do and how to react, and relationships that you hadn't been, let's say, nourishing may all of a sudden come back into your life over the loss of the person, which can be the positive side of grief because you're reconnecting with people you haven't seen in a while over the shared loss. But ultimately everybody grieves in their own way, and there's no set rules and there's no right or wrong, and people do what they need to do in order to get through the situation. And I know sometimes people looking from the outside in might think what the person who is closest to the loss experiences and decides may not be what they think is the right thing. But certainly we have a lot of more information than we used to have in the past. And people are more perhaps open to talking about loss. And so we have certain guidelines that we can look for to make sure that we're not judging the person who experiences the loss or people, and we're not rushing them through that. And also on the same token, we're also around to make sure they don't do anything rash during the early stages of loss. Right? Yeah. So there's a lot that kind of goes into that. I think mainly for me, I'm thinking that there's the emotional end of grieving and how that looks. And then there's the physical, your body, and how it feels going through loss, and how you deal with that, and how you may not realize that you are affected until you start thinking about how you're feeling throughout the course of a day. Right? And then you realize this might be grief.
I think our bodies kind of set us up to withstand a lot. You kind of get into this weird survival mode when you're grieving.
Right.
it's weird because there's the logical grieving and then there's the emotional grieving and what you're talking about too, the bodily grieving. And it's just, it's hard because sometimes they all are there and other times it's just one or two and you never know what it's going to be. You just have to kind of roll with it. And I was walking to work the other day and I was just listening to a song or something and I just started to feel my breath pick up and I mean it's a hilly walk, but I wasn't out of breath right then. And then I was starting to tear up and I was like, "Oh, I might be having some sadness and some feelings of loss and grieving that." And but it kind of takes you out of, you're like, "Oh, like is this a panic attack? Am I grieving? What is happening right now and how do I navigate this discomfort?" I've suffered, I mean, we both have a lot of loss in our lives, unfortunately. And me from a very young age, I used to not want to do something when we had to navigate hard things in my childhood. You'd be like, just go to school, focus on school, and just we'll do your routine kind of thing. And I think as a child that was really beneficial. As an adult, it's harder to get up and want to put your pants on and say, yeah, I'm going to go to work today and be distracted by work. It's nice to be distracted from grief for a little bit, but it's also really hard because you kind of just like don't, everything's a little dim, you know, when you kind of feel like your shoulder is hurt and you're kind of lopsided. It's just, and you have to go through life like that for a little bit, and it's not fun when you don't want to do anything like you normally did, and also navigating this loss of a relationship and thinking about all the things that this person meant to you and disbelief that they're not here and how you're going to move forward and what it's going to look like for your family members who I'm devastated for or whoever. It's so much to navigate. And I'm in that place right now with waking up in the morning or in the middle of the night and remembering that this loss has happened and then having this kind of quasi panic attack where it's like disbelief that that is the new reality. The world just feels different, a little off its
Mhm.
axis. Yeah, and that's I would say consistently the feeling that I've gotten with every loss in my life with whenever it's friends, family who have passed, because I've dealt with friend passing and family members, and it's, yeah, it's the same feeling throughout consistently of that disbelief and the waves of shock and grief that rush over you.
I agree with you. It's kind of amazing how well humans do in these situations because they become task driven. Things
Yeah.
have to be done. And
Hmm.
so we do them. And that's a way of dealing and deflecting, but things have to happen. There's the
Hmm.
reality of the business of dying, right? And
Yeah.
then, or death. And then there's the surreal feeling. You said limb. I was thinking you're kind of out on a limb because you're in the
Mm.
surreal sort of limbo state where you're all there helping the person who has suffered the loss, and you've all suffered the loss, but the person who may have been the closest to the person you're trying to support and help. And
Right.
so you're having regular conversation, and there's laughter at times, and there's meals, and then there's discussion about the person and what we
Yeah.
have to do because that person's not here. And so it goes like from what seems like reality to some weird, surreal kind of non reality all at the same time.
Hmm.
And I think that in general, most human beings, I'm going to say most because I'm an optimist, really can travel between these worlds, even though they have their feelings and even though they might be having physical manifestations of the loss and emotional manifestations, they're still able to do things in a pragmatic way. When we were younger and we would watch TV and there somebody would die, I mean, people would fall on the floor and they would, yell and yelp. And there are cultural differences where that does happen, and that's a
Hmm.
way of cleansing yourself and really feeling the loss. And that's okay. I respect that. But I
Hmm.
remember when I was a kid watching certain things on TV and it seemed very everything is overly dramatized, even childbirth. So it
Mm-hmm.
just goes in that whole thing. And how I would think about that as I got older, and how would I react if somebody, am I going to do that? Am I going to like
Mm-hmm.
throw myself on the ground? Am I going to be crying and lose my sense of reality? But the
Mm-hmm.
reality is, most people don't
Mm-hmm.
lose their sense of reality. And some people do things they probably aren't great. But for the most part, people just set to the business of task on hand. And
Mm-hmm.
then when those tasks are finished, then the reality of the situation presents itself. And I think that's when it gets hard. So I remember when your dad passed away and I came home because we had spent the weekend with my in-laws, your grandparents, and then we came home. And I remember going shopping with your grandma and getting food in the house, and she left, and there I was with you two and me. And I remember looking over at the counter and seeing your dad's keys on the counter. And in that moment, I thought, oh, this is how it's always been. Everything's okay. Because
Mm-hmm.
that's where his keys used to be. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea that I was going to go back to this quote unquote new normal and everybody
Mm-hmm.
else was just going to go back to the way it was for them.
Mm-hmm.
And for the longest while, I pondered that. At times I resented it,
Sure.
because I'm like, well, you guys are all going back to what you always went back to, and I have to do something completely different now that I've never done before.
Yeah.
So that's part of the grieving process also. I mean, people will say, oh, it's a new chapter. You have to write a new chapter. When I went to grief counseling, he said, well, this is a new chapter in your book. And I remember saying out loud, I don't want a new chapter for my book. Thank you very much. I
Yeah.
like the way I was writing my book from the first chapter to this chapter. I don't
Right.
want to have to do a U-turn
Right. Yeah.
and write a new chapter, right?
Exactly.
And of
Mm-hmm.
course, that was just partly anger and frustration and the feeling of being lost. But
Yeah.
then, of course, I realized, yeah, come on, if you're going to be healthy and you're going to go on with your life, you have to realize that there's going to be a bunch of change and you're going to have to deal with it one thing at a time until it starts to
Mm-hmm.
become your normal, not new normal, but becomes your normal. I remember that when I was at school, I was teaching as in the lunch lounge for lunch. And I remember saying to somebody, well, I'm just going to have to relax into this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't keep fighting against it. I'm just going to have to give into it and just know that this is how it's going to be. But part of a loss, I think, well, at least for me, I can only speak for myself and for what it was for me at that time. There was some magical thinking that was there, not that the person was going to come back necessarily, but that I
Mm-hmm.
could insert myself into another family so I wouldn't have to deal with this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember
Yeah.
having I would drive home and there's houses on both sides of the street where I was driving, and I would look into the houses and I would see people. And I said, well, wouldn't it be great if I could just walk be the mother of that family with my kids and walk right into the situation that was already set up?
Yeah.
And I know people are going to listen to that and say, well, that's weird. But I don't think anything's weird. I think that when you lose something that you were entrenched in, and especially you have children, you want everything to go back the way it was, and you
Yeah.
can't.
You're
And there are moments,
desperate to find normalcy and comfort.
right, right,
Yeah.
right, right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the part that is really, that takes time. That takes a
Yeah.
lot of time. And some people find a relationship right away and other people don't. And I'm not saying that one's better than the other, but I will say, because I'm opinionated about certain things like everybody else is, if you
Mm-hmm.
have children, I think the worst thing that you can do is introduce another person right away. You
Mm-hmm.
have to, and it depends on the age of your children, let's face it. If you have adult children, it might be a little bit different. But if you have young children, you may need to take a step back
Mm-hmm.
and not create another new thing when the thing that you had hasn't even had a chance to
Little.
settle. Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Talk about grief coming at you in waves because we're dealing with, I think, this current loss and it being really present for us. I was at I was doing lunch duty today at work for students, and they're all eating their lunches, and some come with packed lunches, some eat the school lunch. And I'm just going to add the school lunches today are way different than the school lunches I got in the 90s. Okay, these look way better.
Oh,
But,
really? I'm surprised.
oh yeah, no, there's actually fruit, like whole fruit and
Oh,
vegetables and stuff.
nice.
I know, pretty cool. But I walked past to see if kids need help opening their lunch stuff, whatever. I walked
Right.
past a kid today, and there was the lunch note out from the parent. You know how
Aw,
parents put notes in their kids' lunches?
yeah.
Well, I looked at this note and I read it, and it said, "Hope you have a great lunch. I love you so much." And then it was signed Dad. And
Uh-huh.
I was in the cafeteria just tearing up. And I was like, oh my
Right.
gosh. Because you would write me notes like that, but just
Yeah.
seeing Dad on there and not a
Right.
name, you could it could be anonymous dad, whoever.
Right. Right.
So, but to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, like it made me so sad for a second because I was like, oh, I never got notes from my dad in my
Right.
lunchbox. And it's making me tear up now because I think it's like people think that loss, you get over it when it's
Right.
been 20 something years, but you don't because you're still that child. You were, even if you're 34 years old, you're still the child. You know what I mean? Even if you're 67, you're still the child that had a loss or whatever age you were when you had a loss. So I think writing off that grief gets easier. You learn to live with it and you learn to kind of navigate it the best way you can while living your life. Because
Right.
at the end of the day, you have to just live your life, right?
Right.
Whether it's for the people that have passed or for yourself in honor of the people that have passed, you have to kind of put those pieces back together and try to understand your grief as best you can while being present in your own life, which is really hard to do.
It is. I mean, you bring up the point, they have a term for that, which is closure. I
Hmm.
do hear that quite often. I know in certain situations, there are certain things that do help people move on. And that's, God forbid, somebody was involved in a criminal case and they got murdered, let's say. And
Hmm.
finally, they finally come to a resolution. And the person's either incarcerated or they know they're not going to be incarcerated and they're just going to have to move on. So
Hmm.
I know there are people that say, well, now we have closure. But what I think in that situation, what they're saying is now we're done with that task and we can move forward thinking about the person without having to come to court or file
Hmm.
papers or talk to lawyers. I mean, that's one thing.
Right.
But it for me, and that's doesn't that happens, but that's not the nature of most people's losses. But for me, I don't believe in closure. I don't care what
No.
the circumstance was. I think
Hmm.
that in a way, I almost prefer there not be closure because you can use that word as if you're going to close the door, but you never close the door. You just can't
Right.
because you were
No.
alive too when that person was alive and you created memories with that person, good, bad, or indifferent. And
Hmm.
those memories are going to pop up when you're doing other things in the present,
Right.
whether you're doing it with somebody else or you're doing it by yourself. And they can be memories that make you like mad and frustrated. They can also be memories that are very delightful and make you feel nostalgic for that person. Even if you're mad, you might feel nostalgic for that person.
Totally.
It's
Yes.
the human emotional base is convoluted
I know.
and
Very
wrapped up
messy.
and very messy. And I want to use the F word. So effed up as well. But because we've been taught that emotion, I think that early on we were sort of given the message that emotions are separate and you don't have them together.
Right.
And then you have this term called bittersweet, which is
Right.
antithetical to that. If something
Hmm.
is bittersweet, there are two opposing emotions together. And
Right.
now we say this thing is the new thing is, well, you can hold space for both of those ideas. You can
Right.
hold space for all of that. That's the new
That's a
thing,
new
right?
terminology.
Right,
Yes, it
new
is.
terminology.
Hmm.
So I prefer that over you can't be happy at the same time you're sad. I
Right.
remember one time in therapy, right around the time, I think it was right after your dad died. And I had this experience in therapy I'd never had before where I was crying and laughing at the same time.
Mm, mm-hmm.
And the reason behind that was because of the amount of responsibility I was carrying
Mm-hmm.
before he died and after he died. And the therapist must have said something to me like, you don't have to have that responsibility. And that moment where you're sad because look at all the time you spent and you wanted to have that responsibility for whatever reason, and the relief that you don't have to have that responsibility, which was sort of elating. And the
Right.
two of them colliding at the same time, it was so like I couldn't figure out
Jarring.
what's going
Yeah.
on. And
Mm-hmm.
I have not experienced that since,
Mm-hmm.
but I can tell you, having experienced it, and I'm sure other people have as well, you can have conflicting emotions all at the same time, and they're all very genuine and validated, and
Yeah,
valid. So can be
absolutely.
validated. So yeah, so I don't think the idea of closure, unless you really despise the person, it just doesn't
No.
sit well with me because I would prefer not to have that closure because as much as whatever the whoever the person was at the time of their death, whether it was a wonderful situation you had with them or whatever, or a difficult situation you had with them, they walked the face of the earth and you were with them.
Right.
You knew them, you spent time with them, and so how can you possibly pretend that that doesn't matter
Right.
to you?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I wouldn't want anybody, maybe this is an ego thing, but I don't think any of us want to be forgotten. I think that's why people are afraid of death. They're
Yeah.
afraid of not being here anymore, obviously, and not being able to do the things they want to do, but they're also afraid of being forgotten,
Yeah, I think so.
and
Or
as
like
I
not
get
leaving their mark or something.
right, and you don't have to do anything amazing. You don't have to be a billionaire and have your name on a hospital wing, but it is nice when people bring your name up.
Yeah.
Right? It is
Mm-hmm.
nice when you might see your name written somewhere. On plenty of people's names are on monuments and memorial boards and all that. I think that the validity of saying somebody's name, whether it was because there's a political thing that happened and we say their name to remember them, or whether it's just somebody in our family,
Yeah.
it's really good to talk about them and bring up silly things about them or even things that really frustrated the hell out of you
Yeah, totally.
because that's okay too.
It is. So I was talking to my partner recently about wanting to have photographs of family members who are no longer here. And I think what brought that up is because I now have my dad's ashes with me, which is a whole new world for me, too. It's always something that I went to go visit at my grandmother's house. And she had a picture of him there and some prayers, I think. And so I would go say hi when I would go to her house for the holidays and things like that. But now he's here with me. And so I was like, well, maybe I should have other people because so many things live on our phone now. And I was thinking I would like to have more of a daily reminder of the people. So I do have my Apple Watch and I have photos of my grandparents and people on there, of course, but which is nice. But having an area like an altar would be awesome to do. And I think in Mexico and other cultures in that area, they have ofrendas where they have photos of past family members and they make a whole celebration of that during Dia de los Muertos. And I always really appreciated that part of their culture because I do think that in our culture, we kind of push to the side death and we push to the side people who have passed. But I do think that I know it would be nice for me anyway to remember them and to talk about them more. I think incorporating people who are no longer with us and in our everyday lives still is it can be really powerful and important and instead of not including them because the hole that is left from their loss could be filled with speaking of them out loud.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, well, I have pictures here that were given to me. When my mom passed away, my stepdad brought some pictures over. There's a whole bunch of pictures I'll never see again. But I have some and I have them up and I get to see my uncles and great great grandparents and that kind of stuff I have here. and my own parents are here. It's interesting because for some people, well, maybe for all of us, we just don't speak about it, or maybe I won't. Maybe I shouldn't say all of us, but for a vast majority of us, there's a superstition around that.
Right, like
Around
you're gonna catch.
Yeah, yeah, it's like contagious, and you don't
Well,
want to put things up because God forbid that will happen to you. Just like the
right.
reason why we don't want to talk about wills
I know.
or prepare for death because we're afraid once we start talking about it, we'll be
It's gonna
kiboshed.
happen.
But
I know. And I feel like in our family, I mean, we've talked about this, like, is there a curse on our family? Is there like, are we a target? Like, we've kind of dealt with a lot of loss throughout both of our lives. And I know that's common because what is life without loss? But it's just kind of unheard of to lose so much. But then it's so many people are losing things every day, in all different contexts and all different parts of the world. So I
right,
think, yeah, we have to remember who is here and make those relationships what we want. And I think with this most recent loss, I'm realizing how much I didn't say out loud and how much I had left to say and all those things. And I'm reminded to just say things to people when they're here, and not wait to tell someone how you feel about them or a nice compliment or reliving a shared memory with them or something like that. Because with all this talk, we're talking about grief, and we used to talk about the 5 stages of grief. Well, I think that's, I mean, the stages are probably true, but also I think grief is really cyclical. I don't know that you go through all the stages and then get to the top and you're like, cool, where's my medal? You
right.
know?
We do them in order.
Yeah, it's like, it's just
Okay, done with
yeah,
that.
I know, done, cool, don't have to think about that anymore. But really, it's
Right,
just like the 5 stages of grief over and over and over and over and over again
right. Might even be
throughout
more
your life.
stages now because who knows?
Exactly.
I haven't looked at that recently, but I wanted to say a couple of things. When your dad passed away, you probably don't remember that you said this to me, and I hope I can share this with you. You said to me, "We have a gray cloud over us,"
Oh,
and
really?
and I said, "No, we don't. It's random.
Hmm.
It happened to us, but it wasn't chosen for us." In other
Yeah.
words, we weren't on a list and they say, okay, bam, you're it.
Yeah.
It's just a random act. And so for those of us who stick around into our hundreds and beyond, and for those of us who don't, so many reasons why that happens.
Yes.
And we have a lot of pride. We congratulate people when they become centenarians. We have a lot of pride in marriages that last forever, even though we don't know what the nature of those marriages are because we're not there. Some people are just stubborn and stay.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But
Like my
yeah,
grandparents, probably.
yeah, yeah. But the thing is that it's all random. And I think that for me, it's really hard when people say, well, this happened for a reason. And I always say,
Oh, I cannot.
BS to that,
Yeah, I cannot
because it's,
handle that.
yeah, I don't, this happened and I wish it didn't happen for you, but I'm here for you if you need something. I would rather hear that than, well, it happened for a reason or they're in a better place. Now, the better place would have been here
No,
with us
here with
because
us
I
going
don't
to
know what
therapy
the other place
or
is
whatever.
like. Right.
Yeah,
So we say these things because we really don't know what to say. And we
we
also
don't.
say them because we're not vulnerable enough and maybe we're not generous enough to
Yeah,
say, I'm here for you, because that's a responsibility
I agree. I don't think a lot of people know how to be there for someone, truly and genuinely there for someone and
or even
follow
want
through.
to. Right.
I agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think people do.
Yeah, it's a big deal. So,
Hmm.
so having said that, I was also going to say something else that you mentioned that, when you suffer a loss, maybe currently or pretty recently, it brings up, it kind of ramps up the losses that you've had in the past, and it
Right.
reminds you of that feeling, and it reminds you of the things that you felt that you didn't get to do or say. and it makes you feel,
Uneven.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah. So I think that the more that people get in touch with their emotional base and aren't afraid to feel, the better off they are in the long run, because you can find such great satisfaction. And now I'm not saying, oh, you're going to be happy and oh, this is
Right.
going to make me feel so great, but the satisfaction that you get knowing that you're allowing yourself to feel the loss of a person or
Hmm.
any kind of emotion just makes it that much easier to cope.
Yeah.
I think running away from stuff just manifests itself into all kinds of behavior that's not may
For
not be
sure.
appropriate and also
Yeah.
just might be very surface and superficial.
Hmm. I agree.
So if you're interested in knowing yourself at all, then the act of grieving and the act of learning from the loss, if you're not the one that was directly affected, but you were indirectly affected, is really potentially growth inducing, I
Yeah.
think,
I
you know.
agree. I
Yeah.
totally agree.
But it
Absolutely.
hurts.
Yeah. It
And
does. Oh my God.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of crying. And
Ugh,
there's just a
I know.
lot of and it's
And the crying is
exhausting.
painful.
Yeah.
And
And it's
yeah, it's
physically.
like your eyes are
Yeah.
swollen and your throat hurts and
Yeah. And
you
you're
can't eat
tired.
and you're tired.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awful.
Oh, I know. I
Yeah.
remember when your dad died, I thought there was something wrong with me because I couldn't swallow. Like there was
Yeah.
this big knot and I couldn't
Hmm.
swallow it down. And then I learned, well, that's part of grieving. That's
Grieving.
the whole upset and anxiety and the whole thing involved with that. So your body manifests itself in so many ways to remind you that, you know what, go ahead and grieve. Just do
Hmm.
it already. Relieve yourself
Yeah.
of of this. Let your body allow you to have that quote unquote release or comfort that you might get from that, and trust yourself
Hmm.
in that process. I know there are people like my stepmother who we believe died of what they call broken heart syndrome, but she was elderly when my father passed away.
Yeah.
She was almost 80, and it's possible that that was true. And
Right.
I know that could be a thing, but I don't think you should be afraid to grieve because you're afraid of that,
Right. Yeah.
right? Because I
Yeah.
don't think that is generally, I don't know what the percentage of people that
Hmm.
may be diagnosed with that, but I
Yeah.
don't think it's very high. And what I think is the positive effect, and I think maybe I said it earlier, is the coming together of the people who knew the person who passed away and reestablishing relationships, even if it's just momentarily during that time,
Hmm.
or starting new traditions,
Hmm.
right, around the loss.
Right.
And, but most importantly, not beating yourself up about what you could have done, would have done, and should have done.
I
Your
know.
grandpa Ray used to say, woulda, shoulda, coulda, didn't. So,
Yeah. That's good. I'll use that.
yeah.
I was thinking about my childhood, and I remember being in, I don't know if it was third or fifth grade, but being in my classroom, and we might have been doing an activity where we had to do something with our families or writing down, I don't know what it was, but I
Yeah.
was thinking about my loss at
Right.
8 or 10 years old, right? And I remember, you know how you say things to yourself as a kid because you've heard adults say them? And
Hmm.
so you're trying things out because it's mature, or you're like, oh, you're just mimicking what other people have said around you, and adult or kids mimic adults all the time. I remember it was, these are the cards I've been dealt. Like that's what I just kept saying to myself.
Oh.
These are the cards I've been dealt. And I was really upset about that, because all the
Hmm.
other kids in my class hadn't been dealt the
Those
the
cards.
loss of a parent,
Yeah.
and so I was like, of course, why me? That's obviously what I was thinking at 8 or 10 years old or whatever. But it's also trying to understand not only the loss, but what that means. These are the cards I've been dealt. And
Mhm.
what is that? How do you even navigate that as a child? This is me telling myself this. Of course, I got told that I was wise for my years growing up, or like things like that. But I wonder like how much of loss contributed to me growing up faster,
Oh
or
yeah.
just like having that wisdom that comes with loss,
Right.
because you get that, you gain that when you do lose people, but usually it's in your adulthood and not in your childhood. So, yeah, I just remember thinking that was so weird, like trying to comfort myself by saying that these are the cards I've been dealt, and also not really sure how to play those cards, because how do you do that? I still don't know
Yeah, I mean, how do
necessarily.
you do that? No, I agree
Yeah,
with you. I mean, I remember going, this is going to sound sort of inane, so don't laugh at me, but
it's a
I
safe
remember
space,
going
Mom.
to therapy after Princess Diana was killed, and
Hmm.
she had these two boys,
Yeah.
and royalty or no royalty, they're children. And I
Right.
remember one of the first things I said when I walked into the room was, I can't believe that my children's loss of innocence is the same, it is basically the same as Princess Diana's children's loss of innocence. I mean, I said something, well, now my children have something in common with that. And it just really bothered me because I felt as a parent, you want your kids to have as much of a childhood as possible before the realities of adulthood creep up. And that happens pretty goddamn fast, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I felt an overwhelming mourning of you and your brother's childhoods because I felt like I had contributed to your loss of innocence,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And uh, that just kind of bowled me over. And so when this happened to Princess Diana, I was like, oh my gosh, they're experiencing that same loss. Now, obviously, there's some things we may have in common with the royal children, but ultimately they're just children,
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
and what they had, their loss was so out there.
Yeah. Public.
Everybody was feeling that loss with them. And I really don't know if that was helpful or not for them.
I know. I don't know
It
that it
must have
was.
been overwhelming. And the amount of, because they were part of that situation and the amount of pomp and circumstance around it and the rules and regs around it may have been very confining for them.
Yeah.
And I hope they were able to get help. I think as a parent, you bring in children into the world because you want to make sure that you bring in children into the world and you want to make sure that they're going to be okay through that childhood. And
Hmm.
when something like you just never anticipate that.
No, and it's like, I think this is kind of interesting, but navigating loss and grieving, maybe it's one of the reasons why I've chosen so far to not have kids, because I'm terrified of having children and then not being here for them physically, or my partner not being here for them. Or it's like, also, because I know that loss and I
Right,
don't want to do that to children. And then at the same time, feeling like I'm going to continue to lose people that I deeply care and love. And does that mean I should bring a child into the world because I want to continue having a family? And these bonds that we have and create with people in our lives start with family. And I don't know, it's an interesting place to live in, because on the one hand, I'm like, absolutely not. I don't want to. Well, there's a multitude of reasons I wouldn't want to bring a child into the world right now. And at the same time, we talk about hosting multiple feelings at once. It's
right.
like, gosh, maybe I should have a child, but then is that the right choice to have a child out of feeling grief and sadness and loss? I don't know, but maybe that's the only reason people do have kids, is to continue that lineage and to continue life amongst the chaos and amongst grieving,
Well,
because
yeah,
we're always, you know,
yeah. There's hope in that. I think I
there,
mentioned that about in COVID, how I was so surprised that so many people decided to continue having families during that time. So that shows a
right?
lot of hope, right, and optimism.
Yeah.
For me, what I lost big time, amongst so many other things, and I really don't talk about this at all, and I'm not going to talk about it to the extent I could because it's still hard for me to talk about it. But
Hmm.
I lost the cavalier feelings that a lot of my friends who were parents had.
Yeah,
I
I know.
lost that absolutely, completely, totally. And I don't know if people understand that, but I can just say that, well, for one thing, I can't wait till my kid gets a driver's license so I don't have to take them to school. I'm like, oh, hell
I
no.
know.
I am not ready I'm like, I'll take my kid to school until they're 27. I don't give a
I
shit.
know.
I am
See,
not.
and I know that
So,
that's the parent I'm gonna be, and I'm anxiety ridden, and maybe I
well,
would have been regardless, but I maybe that's from you, Mom.
well, it was only because I don't, sure, I would have had a sense of anxiety anyway, but my anxiety over these regular everyday things got really overblown. And
Yes,
I couldn't allow myself for you to do things and for your brother to do things. I think we did a lot of things. You just didn't know how I was feeling inside. But there were
you sure
certain
about
things
that?
that I don't know, maybe you did. And now I feel really worse. Now I feel horrible. But
No, I'm not trying
anyway,
to make you feel bad.
yeah, no. But there were certain things that I just wouldn't do
I know.
and still don't do and
You wouldn't let me
say,
drive on the freeway the entire time I was getting my driver's license.
no, that was different. That was because I didn't know how to teach you to be on the freeway, nor did I know how to teach your brother, so I had other people do it for me.
Got it.
That was my
Okay.
own, that was totally different.
Yeah.
But there are things that to this day I won't say or do because I still have this anxiety around it.
Sure.
And for instance, I had friends who said, "Oh, I can't wait. He'll drive this kid, and this kid." I'm like, "Oh, my two kids are not going to be in the same car together when they're new drivers." Oh, no, no, that's not going to happen. And so they had this freedom of thought and
Yeah.
this ability to separate themselves from that, which I could not do.
No.
Right? I just couldn't
No.
do it,
There's no
and
way. I can't
I
do that.
couldn't do it. And it's other things which I will not get into because I still can't talk about them,
Sure,
but
sure.
I own them and I understand them. But yes, and if you recall, it's so incredible what happens when you lose a person. So you remember when you wanted to go on a trip through college to Yucatan Peninsula,
Yeah.
and you were going to be gone for 6 weeks,
Right.
and you weren't 18 yet.
Right. I was 17.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
And I said, because this is what I did, I said, we're going to put the deposit down. And in my mind, if I lose the deposit, I don't care because I now have 10 or 12 weeks to make the decision. So she has the foot in the door, she can go because I
Uh-huh.
put the deposit down. But if I decide I don't like the situation, I'm going to yank it.
Yeah.
And it was the first time, and maybe one of the only times that I felt like I didn't have a safety net and I didn't have the parent of the child to help me make that decision.
Yeah.
And I was a basket case over this freaking decision. So I wound up calling my brother,
Hmm.
who I thought was the only other person that may have had a vested interest in you as his uncle, as your uncle and you being his niece.
Hmm.
And so I called him and I said, I don't know what to do. I put the deposit down, but I don't know. And because this is what he does, he asked me all these really prudent questions. Now, whether or not what actually was supposed to happen happened when you were there, I don't know. But he said what organization he's going to be with, who's going to be there, what is going to, and he delineated all these things for me to the point where I felt like, okay,
Yeah.
you could go.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean every single day for 6 freaking weeks I was like
You're
not
right.
on edge.
I know, because that's back when we had to do prepaid phone cards.
Right.
And I mean,
And that was
yeah.
when I was in my classroom for summer school and I got a phone call from one of the parents and I practically fell through the freaking floor.
Oh,
And
God.
she said, "My son is not picking up his phone. Can you have your daughter tell him to pick up his phone?" Because she was going crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't remember who the kid was, but I
Ay, ay,
contacted
ay.
you. But in that moment when I said hello and she said, I haven't heard from, I'm like, oh my God, I almost fell through the
Oh,
floor. And
shit.
so I haven't heard from
Yeah.
my son. And can you have your daughter call him because he's not picking up the phone? I'm like, sure. And then that all got straightened out.
Oh, good.
But just and so
So,
obviously she was concerned too. I wasn't the
right.
only idiot who was nervous. But there's a lot of not that
So
she was an
worth it
idiot,
to
but you know
have
what I'm saying.
kids and go through those feelings?
Yeah, well, I don't know. You have to make that decision.
I guess I
And I
have to
don't
make
think
my
you're
own
thinking
choice.
of that when you're holding a teeny baby.
But
You're
see, that I
thinking,
feel like
yeah,
I mean you're not, but of course before you have kids, I am thinking that and I wonder if that's because of
yeah,
loss and grief and anxiety and all this shenanigans that we're navigating that a lot of people don't necessarily navigate so early on in life.
right. Yes, I would say, yes, that's part of it. I think that normally when you have a child, there's already anxiety during the pregnancy, there's anxiety after the baby's born. There's going to always be stress
Yeah, it's
because
just
now
part of
you're
your
not just
life.
thinking of yourself, you're thinking of somebody else. And
Yeah.
that person can't navigate the world yet. So you're it's like in the Mad About You episode where she goes, "I'm the mommy." I mean, she really panicked. I'm
Yeah.
the mommy. It finally dawned on her that this is going to be what her role.
Yeah.
But I think that I was trying so hard not to portray what was going on in my body and my mind, but really reticent to, I did not get that freedom
Right.
that I think would have allowed me perhaps to have more children
Oh,
as
interesting.
well.
Yeah.
Maybe later on. I mean, I read about a woman whose husband died and she wanted to have another child, so she adopted a child. My mother said you should have had more children, and I said to her, "Why?" And I said, "Eventually, the last child has to leave the house too, Mom.
Right.
So eventually, you're not going to have your children around." But I think that, and of course, I abandoned that idea. I did think about having children after the fact, even though I was single. But I'm like, that's a whole other can of worms. I don't even want to get into. I don't
Hmm.
want the birth order to be disrupted. I don't want to take away. I just said no. I'm not doing that. So, and I didn't. So I think that when you do go through a loss that is also really premature, because I was I was only 39 and you guys were little.
Yeah.
It does turn upside down your ideas of safety and
Through the world.
right. And even though I am an optimist and an idealist, I'm also a rational, realistic person.
Basket
And
case.
there were certain things I just couldn't, yeah. There were just certain things that I just said to myself, this is not realistic for you. It's unfortunate that you have to think like this, but it's okay. And if this what makes you feel safe, and if this is not going to harm them so much, then I'm going to allow it. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna say something that maybe you're thinking or maybe not. Even if your father was alive,
You would have been the same.
I still would have gone with you on Halloween to the restaurant and sitting there when all the other kids were not being supervised. So that
No,
had
I
nothing to
appreciate
do with
that.
anything.
I would be that parent too. Thanks for sacrificing so much for me.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome, but I would have done it anyway.
I know.
So
Still can't believe you let
yes.
me go out in that outfit, but here we are.
Well, it was better than some of the other outfits
That's true.
that the other kids were wearing.
Yeah, mine was tame in comparison.
Yes. And so I'm happy I was there.
Yeah,
But that had nothing to do with anything, just so you know.
I know. I know. I figured it was just you being a parent, and I was annoyed
Yeah,
because I was a teenager, but it's fine.
right,
It all
right.
worked out,
It did in the end.
and I'm
But
appreciative.
yeah, I would like to say before we might be ending is that avail yourself to grief counseling, please,
Yes.
everybody.
Find all the
And
resources you can to
right.
get help
And
and support.
and
Hmm.
if you have children, send them off to grief counseling as well.
Yeah, so they
It's
can
not
do
a
Rorschach
negative
ink blot
experience.
tests.
I'm sorry.
So they can do Rorschach ink blot tests.
You
And
also created artwork.
I
I
did.
forgot
No, I
that.
know. I'm
Oh,
just
okay.
saying the Rorschach
Yeah.
was a solid memory.
Right, but I also honored it when we were driving home from the last session, and I said, "Well, should we re-register?" And the both of you said no, and I said, "Okay, done."
And scene.
Scene.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was interesting. It felt like church camp. The and I'm not even I mean, I'm Jewish, so how do I even know what that feels like? But that was the
yeah, but
vibe.
it wasn't religious at all.
I know. I don't know what it was about it.
So
Anyway, I'm
never
glad we
really.
went. Thanks for putting us through grief counseling as children.
You're welcome. But I just have to say, I have to finish my sentence. You never really went to church camp.
No, I didn't. It was just always
Okay,
friends who invited me to church camp.
right,
Yeah,
right.
and I always felt really awkward about it.
Well,
Yeah.
it's always good to experience something, and you can always decide whether you like it or not.
Yes, and that's why we try new things.
Right. As long as they're safe. But we won't
Yeah.
talk about church campus being safe or not right now.
Right. It's another episode.
That's all.
That's a whole other bag of worms.
Yeah.
But yes, avail yourself to resources, call people, and make sure that
Ask
you
for
have,
help.
yeah, ask for help. There's no shame in asking for help.
No.
And make sure we have those relationships now with the people who are here now. And reach out to them and build relationships, because it's kind of the foundation of life, I think, is
Yes,
in relationships.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the perfect world, nobody would have to work and we could all just commune with one another.
Right?
Right.
I'm voting for that in the next election.
There you go.
And the hotline for mental health crisis is 988. So be sure to call or text if you're having a mental health crisis.
Thanks for hanging out with us on Kvetchfest. We'd love to hear from you, so send us your complaints, your questions, your juicy annoyances, or anything you need to vent about. You might even hear it featured in a future episode. Depending on where you're listening, you can leave us a voice note, drop something in the Q&A box, or email us directly at kvetchfestpodcast@gmail.com. Whether you want advice, reassurance, or just a space to yell into the void, we're here for you. We've got new episodes every month, so make sure you're following or subscribe so you never miss a good kvetch. Thanks for joining us, because here on Kvetchfest, complaining is cathartic. And remember, if something's on your chest, kvetch it off.